be following this schedule. So I have about 3 more minutes. 9:45. Everybody will take a break. Hold your questions until 10:35 after the break. And we shall close at 11. And Mike will get up very slowly. Careful over there, Mike. That's
You remember?
Notice they pulled it out so the old man wouldn't knock it over. Well, last week we talked a lot about prayer. And how prayer gets us on the way to evangelical discipleship, which is kind of the overarching theme of what's going to be happening in this room for at least the next, I guess, until June, until Pentecost. Because I'm going to finish before Holy Week, and then after Holy Week, David Lacoste is going to do the book that we read as part of the liturgy, the Acts of the Apostles, and that will be just a marvelous time to learn about what evangelization means, because that's what that book is all about. As you know, the Gospel of Luke Luke's writings have 2 parts. One is the Gospel, which is all about Jesus telling people what, revealing the Father to them and talking to them about discipleship, and then the book of Acts, which Luke also wrote, is about fulfilling what Jesus had sent them to do. Go therefore, teach all nations, etc. So, evangelical discipleship, how we can be disciples and spread the good news. So last week we did prayer, and we talked about how prayer is part of the journey that began with our baptism. And how necessary prayer is to connect belief and life. Prayer is the bridge that connects belief and life. Because we need to connect with God about those truths revealed in Jesus Christ, so we find out how to live those in our lives. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of the second part of Lenten observance, which is fasting. So, immediately what comes up is, what did you give up for Lent? Right? And how our Lenten observance was often confined to that. generally speaking, I see roughly the same crowd at Mass during the week that I do during the rest of the year. So not very many people are, exposing themselves to Jesus in the sacraments during this time, and that includes reconciliation, which is what Lent is all about. So, it's very, very important if we're talking about discipleship to really come to understand what the church holds out to us as ways of turning away from sin and believing in the good news of the gospel, right? If you're not hearing the gospel more often, if you're not hearing it explained, if you're not reading it and understanding what it means to live that out in your life, then the core of Lent, Lent is kind of gutted in its ability to be what it's really all about. Now, we don't think of fasting as a spiritual observance. We can, it's more like dieting, right? I'm going to lose some weight during Lent, right? I'm not going to. No, Lent becomes a matter of wine and chocolate, right? You give those things up, right? And then as soon as noon on Holy Saturday the bell rings, they're back in your life again. And what was that all about? Just wanting chocolate and wanting a buzz, right? Of some kind. Because, chocolate will do a good job of getting caffeine into your blood. So, this is a long reading. But the church held it up for us last Saturday, which most of us didn't hear the Saturday gospel. We heard the Sunday gospel if you went to 5 o'clock Mass. So, interestingly enough, I got to preach this to the alumni at Santa Catalina, talking to those wonderful women about fasting and what real fasting is all about. As Isaiah said, the Lord says, "Shout as loud as you can. Tell my people Israel about their sins. They worship me every day, claiming that they are eager to know my ways and obey my laws. They say they want to give me just laws, and that they take pleasure in worshiping me." The people ask, "Why should we fast if the Lord never notices? Why should we go without food if he pays no attention?" The Lord says to them, the truth is that at the same time as you fast, you pursue your own interests and oppress your workers. Your fasting makes you violent, and you quarrel and fight. Do you think this kind of fasting will make me listen to your prayers? When you fast, you make yourselves suffer. You bow your heads low like a blade of grass and spread out sackcloth and ashes to lie on. Is that what you call fasting? Do you think I will be pleased with that? The kind of fasting I want is this: remove the chains of oppression and the yoke of injustice, and let the oppressed go free. Share your food with the hungry and open your homes to the homeless poor. Give clothes to those who have nothing to wear, and do not refuse to help your own relatives. Then my favor will shine on you like the morning sun, and your wounds will be quickly healed. I will always be with you to save you. My presence will protect you on every side. When you pray, I will answer you. When you call to me, I will respond. If you put an end to oppression, to every gesture of contempt, and to every evil word, if you give food to the hungry and satisfy those who are in need, then the darkness around you will turn to the brightness of noon. And I will always guide you and satisfy you with good things. I will keep you strong and well. You will be like a garden that has plenty of water, like a spring of water that never goes dry. Your people will rebuild what has long been in ruins, building again on the old foundations. You will be known as the people who rebuilt the walls, who restored the ruined houses. The Lord says, if you treat the Sabbath as sacred and do not pursue your own interests on that day, if you value my holy day and honor it by not traveling, working, or talking idly on that day, then you will find the joy that comes from serving me. I will make you honored all over the world, and you will enjoy the land I gave to your ancestor Jacob. I, the Lord, have spoken. So fasting turns out to be something just a little bit more than wine and chocolate. It turns out to look like justice and the righteousness of God. It turns out to look like God at work in the world. That's what fasting turns out to look like. God at work in the world. But see, in order to do that, the fasting part of it, I think, is that you turn away from what gives you comfort. You turn away from what is usual in your life. You turn away from what everybody approves of. You turn away from everything that keeps you from allowing God to do his work through you in this world. You turn away from the quote-unquote righteousness of the world, which involves, this ladder that everybody climbs so that they can get on top, if that's at all possible, to joining in a common effort to represent God in the world, to do what you say, what God tells you to say, and do what God tells you to do. Because there are some things that Isaiah talks about here that can be done by individuals, like, remove the chains of oppression. I mean, we know that there are oppressed people. How do we as individuals change that? Or do we have to have an attitude and a perspective and behave as communities who take that mission to ourselves? Is that what being church is about? I think I'm going to just close Isaiah now and take a little bit of a different way here. I just want to say something about something rather brief about the history of fasting. Well, if you were at Mass this morning, then you heard, the story of Jonah preaching to Nineveh, and what the king of Nineveh, having heard Jonah and his call to repentance, calls on all the people and the animals, which is really interesting, right? To put on sackcloth and ashes and not eat or drink. And they do that. And I'm still fascinated about the part of the animals in that. You don't let cows and goats and sheep not eat or drink, they make a lot of noise. And if the people forgot about fasting, the animals would surely tell them about it, right? So, because that would be a big, big ruckus. So, fasting is part of repentance in the Old Testament. I mean, that's not the only example of it, but it's interesting because it brings up two things: sackcloth and ashes. Sackcloth. Do you ever? It just occurred to me that I've heard sackcloth also referred to as hopsacking. Have you ever heard that word? Well, I found out what that was all about when I went to Mount Angel, and that's how they've contained hops, and sent them from the where they were harvested to where you make the beer. So hopsacking is not very nice to wear, though, because it's itchy. Yeah. And so there seems to be connected to fasting. I mean, and then if you mix this hopsacking with ashes, pouring ashes on your head, and you think of working under those circumstances or anything like that, you're a mess. You really, really are. So that there is something about discomfort that is connected with fasting. That the sackcloth and the ashes remind you that you're fasting. Because, of course there were never showers, but, this level of discomfort is what keeps you aware that this is a special time in your life. And that special time of the discomfort points to the God in whose honor you take up this time. It shows your respect for the command of God to repent and for us, turn away from sin and believe in the gospel. There's that twofold there's that twofold part of Lent, which is I said last week, Lent is the Teutonic or early German word for springtime, which is a time of growth and preparation to be fruitful. So this fasting thing is part of spending time focused on God. And from that focus on God, and for us, the gospel, we need, we're not going to talk about, well, we talked about it last time, and we said prayer is the bridge between this focus on God and the gospel to connect it to life. So, the important thing is that there is a real reason for this. I mean, a physical reason for this discomfort. The sackcloth and the ashes are to remind you that this is a different time of life, that this is a different season, that this is, not just a ritual. That's why on the day we run away from the church with ashes on our forehead, we heard in the gospel, when you fast, do not change how your faces look, right? Because that part is just ritualistic. But if indeed this ritual has an effect in your life, then there's no problem with it. Sackcloth and ashes are a good thing. Walking around Thursday morning, I got to Resurrection to say Mass, and I looked in the mirror. I thought I had washed my face. But there it was. Part of it still on there. Right. So, this is a sidebar. The thing that happens to liturgy is that it becomes ritual. It becomes rubrics accompanied by music. That's all. You walk through it like, okay, we got to get through this. This guy's preaching a long time. Not to say that some homilies aren't too long, including mine. So, the church, realizing this, saw from early on, before the beginning of the 2nd century, between the 3rd century, 150 and 200, Irenaeus, one of the great theologians and fathers of the church, talked about preparing for feasts by fasting. Hey, we're going to celebrate something really special tomorrow. Let's sharpen our focus. Let's remember that this is not just another day on the calendar, see? And when I was a kid, we fasted and abstained on Friday, on Wednesday, on Friday, and on Saturday of Lent. And, of course, but we just did it very ritualistically, My father used to call meat side hill salmon. He said you could always eat side hill salmon on Friday. Right? But I think that one of the things that Vatican II was refocusing us on things that we had taken for granted and used ritualistically, and gave us the curiosity of saying, why did we start out doing that in the first place? And why did we start out believing that in the first place? There's a French word. We could say it in English, resourcement. It means going back to the sources. It means going back and exposing yourself to history to try to find how what becomes ritual is connected to real life. How it becomes what we would call in the 20th century existential for us, how it's connected with our existence. Yeah, and not just a set of things that we do without really knowing why we're doing them, and which don't seem to be much connected to our lives, except to be like a museum that we walk through. So, fasting has an organic connection with conversion. And anything that has an organic connection to conversion has an organic connection to our baptism and to evangelical discipleship, which is a goal that we're trying to understand by understanding more deeply what this word evangelical means for us, and also what discipleship means for us. This is like Evangelical Discipleship 101, right? It's just a beginning, just the beginning. See, baptism commits us to constant conversion in the same way that the church is committed by its mission to always being in a state of reforming itself, in a state of reformation. Now, I'm very impressed, as you well know, by the 12-step program, because I think it contains everything. It contains a lot of things that we need to know. Yeah, and you know that at every meeting, people get up and they say, my name is Mike, and I'm an alcoholic. I mean, we're talking about people who haven't had a drink for 30 years, and they're still saying, I'm an alcoholic. Just like we should understand that we can get up and say, my name is Mike and I'm a sinner, right? Because I think that we had an idea, and where we got it, I don't know, and where the people who taught us got it, I don't know, that somehow being a member of the church was a way of escaping sin, right? No, it's not. It's not at all. And got this false kinds of righteousness that said, if a person looks pious, they're a saint. Right? So, this like living living as a Christian means knowing that, but for the grace of God, there I go right now. Just like the alcoholic knows that I take a drink, I'm gone. I'm gone. We are all in the process of conversion, the conversion that will only end with our death. And then God will show us how we're holy. Because that will be the only thing that God can show us, is how our lives contributed to the salvation of the world. God can make it work. No matter what we did, God can make it work. And we are part of a church that is always in the process of reforming itself, because it's like the alcoholic too, you know. Somehow this process of the church becoming who it is in history, you know, is parallel to what we're becoming in our lifetime. And so we move along, step by step, one foot after the other. See, remember last week we especially took a look at how Francis said that through the poverty which Christ teaches us, we are, by his life, we are made rich. Well, I'm willing to say, if we really know the part that fasting takes in our lives, then fasting makes us filled, satisfied. That's what it leads to. So, you know, but we are a people addicted to comfort. We are, you know, I start to get a headache, I'm headed for the medicine cabinet. What the heck is that all about? Yeah, I don't even give it a chance, you know, to get full blown. God forbid that I should be distracted by a little pain, right? God forbid. Or that I should ever ask, what part does this headache have in God's plan for my life today, right? I mean, if that sounds silly, I'm sorry, but I don't think it's a silly question. You know, will it move me to think about people who, you know, suffer migraines, the extent of which I can't even imagine, you know, the pain and the discomfort? Do I thank God then that, wow, this is not a very big headache, you know, it's not very big at all, it's a little, you know, see, comfort means that distress or any kind of thing that doesn't fit into my comfort zone, I have to get rid of. You know, and then life becomes a process of, you know, keeping the guard up. So it's not only pain, but painful people, you know, people who somehow raise up my anger, people who somehow make me uncomfortable. I don't want to be around them. Okay, I'll tell you about something that happened to me last night. I was looking for some calamine lotion. And, you know, it's just wonderful that, you know, 30 years ago you could walk into a drugstore and you look for calamine lotion, there'd be a whole bunch of it there, right? Now there's not a whole bunch of calamine lotion, there's a whole bunch of calamine with this, calamine with that, calamine with the other, calamine this, you know, some in liquid form, some sprayed, and all the rest of it, you know, so that I can get exactly what I want. Right? But then, see, I walk out, and I had saw this young man on the sidewalk. I was down on Pacific Avenue at Walgreens. And I looked at him when I walked in, and he was a sorry, sorry sight. Oh, God. He was obviously on something, his lip was cut, and he had a can of something or other in his hand. And he was walking away. And I thought, you know, I should talk to that guy. Well, I passed that up because he was walking in the other direction. That's good. God's sending him away. So I come out, I get into my car, and he's right there against the wall, slobbering all over himself. That blood started coming down. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand it. I got in my car, I left as quick as I could. And you see, because I was distressed, I was anxious, I was like in the wreckage of my future. If I talk to this guy, what the hell will happen? Right? Well, I'll tell you what will happen. I'll become part of his life, and I won't be able to forget him. All I've got to forget right now is what he looked like. But I didn't know who. I didn't give myself a chance at finding out who he was. See, we go back to Isaiah, and he could have played a very important part in my life. A part that would move beyond preaching a good message. A part that would go beyond having pious things to say and discuss and teach. Now, this is what it's all about. And that's why I think, and maybe this is just a good way to get out of it, but, all of us have our weaknesses. All of us, feel discomfort and feel impotence at times like that. I think that's why Jesus sent people out 2 by 2 and not alone. Because we need to be there to support one another. Instead of me thinking to myself, gee, I should talk to that guy. I have somebody with me. I can say, let's go talk to this guy. And you can feel safe. Or safer. So, this idea of fasting, connects us with those places which do not allow us, those places in our lives that do not allow us to live in this evangelical discipleship, going out there and doing. I saw for the first time the video in which Francis talked about, how to, the questions he has for people who want to do these things, or have done them. And it was in a message that he videoed to Buenos Aires on this big feast of Saint Cajetan. Cayetano in Spanish, and also in Italian.
No, it's spelled differently. Cayetano is spelled G-A-E.
In what's the name? No, but I mean pronounced.
Cayetano.
Cayetano in Spanish. Yeah. Time. Oh God. Okay, I will. I'll just say this. What he said was, you should have seen his face though when he was talking about this. When I used to hear confessions, and this guy never really did much as a priest. I mean, he had offices in the Jesuits and stuff like that. But as far as ministry is concerned, he wasn't out there preaching in these big places and all the rest of that. He was going out to the poor in Buenos Aires, and he was spending a lot of time in the confessional. And the Cardinal Archbishop who nominated him to be his auxiliary bishop said, I always know where my auxiliary bishop is. He's in the confessional, right? And so he said, when I'm in there, I ask people, do you give alms? And they say, he said, if they say yes, I say, do you look the people whom you give alms to in the eyes? And if they say yes, then he said, do you touch them? Or do you just drop whatever you're giving them into their hands? Because, see, as would have been true for me yesterday, if I'd have really gone up and looked this guy in the eye, it's been comfortable enough to do that and to be really centered enough to look him into the eyes. Look him in the eyes. I would have seen something other than this slobbering, drunk, sitting on the edge of the street with a can of beer in his mouth, who had obviously either fallen or gotten a fight with somebody and had his lip broken open. I would have seen someone different than that. If I had touched him, it would have made him a part of my life. See, what fasting is all about is making evangelical discipleship possible by taking away obstacles. As prayer is the bridge from belief to life, fasting is the bridge from life to actual ministry. So that's it. Now you can, there's some things there to eat and drink and all the rest of that good kind of stuff. No chocolate, no wine. It's human nature to like wine, too. But you can get addicted to it.
It's human nature to get angry.
Right. And you can get addicted to your anger.
Yes, you can.
I think most people in the United States are addicted to adrenaline. Because it, keeps us going, and we want it, and we want it. And if we don't get it from inside, we get it from the outside with that stuff.
I think most people in the United States are addicted to consumerism and war.
Yeah, we
We're
kind of get
warring people.
we get a chance that we might be able to fight a war. We want to.
I know.
I think the source of war is competition, and that is one of the basic flaws in our culture. Is we're so competitive instead of completing.
But it's very human too.
But it's also, that's what we're talking about, human nature. Instead of completing one another, we compete with one another.
Yeah, that's very good. I like that. Instead of complete, we compete. Very good. So, let's see. It's. I have to remind myself that in the first chapter of Genesis, God looks at what He makes and says, "It is good." And God saw that it was good. All that stuff is good, and we human beings just have a way of, instead of having things draw us to God, having things draw us to them, right? Like booze and sex and money and all the rest of those. The 7 deadly sins. People know which ones they are anymore.
I think. When you eat too much. Gluttony. Pride. Lust.
Anybody remember anger?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jesus had anger.
What we're saying here is these things are all fine and good because God created them.
Right.
But it's the way we use them.
Exactly.
I'm a little confused. I mean, it's a really good discussion because, okay, what I've learned is I'm competitive. I'm intense, I'm materialistic, I'm all these things that you said. Gee, aren't we as a human species, all these, they're almost inherent, right? Not only our society, not, other societies. War seeking, right? We're all these things. That's who we are. And you're saying, don't be yourself. Don't be human nature. Be something different.
No, I'm not. That's it. You missed it entirely.
Okay. Sing.
I said all those things are good. It's only when we get addicted to them, when we can't do without them. And when we're focused on them rather than on the God who gives us these good things. See, last week I said sin is missing the point, right? We miss the point of why God has given us this ability to defend ourselves. Missed giving us this idea of understanding that we have to have something from the outside to keep us alive. That we have to have food and stuff like that. Miss the point that God has given all of these things to us for a reason, and using them for our own reason, which oftentimes is self-comfort. Comfort food we even talk about, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nice big bowl of polenta.
Good.
Winter food. Winter food. Yes, anybody else?
I guess you can talk about climbing the ladder, but if you stop and think about it, probably the most valuable commodity that we have in our lives is time. Because you can always make more money, but you only have so much time. So how you use it, or how you use it is really a very important thing. That should be the most important thing, really.
How do I use my time?
Seems that the Pope has been talking about, instead of pushing people away,
Mm-hmm.
women that have abortions, gay people, we should be drawing them in. And one of the ways to do that is through discomfort, because you get to feel more like them. When all of a sudden you go through a day without eating, it's like, is this how poor people feel?
Mm-hmm.
Is this how the street people feel?
Right.
And it does. I think of those things, it really draws them to you when you're in this involuntary discomfort.
Right. Well, it's interesting to understand that, when we talk about abstaining from meat, that, for a lot of people, that's not a choice.
Right.
Not just because they have a lot of meat to eat, because they never had meat to eat. Because meat is expensive and destructive of the environment to produce. And so, when we think, okay, I'll abstain from meat on Friday, that's not an option for people who never have meat at all. But it is an option for us that we use our fasting to understand them and to become a part of their lives. Potentially, if you fast, then you know what a hungry person feels like. But, there's, for us, even when we fast, there's the idea, I don't have to fast tomorrow, or, whatever. But for those people going to bed hungry so that their children can eat. Yes?
I'm thinking at the time of Jesus, society was relatively simple, and food was important. Today we're living in the information age, and we get indigestion from some of this information.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, couldn't we fast from information?
Sure.
And it'd be more meaningful in our day.
Sure, Richard. Fast from information, because some people are making their informational intake, the whole point of their lives, and they cut down on how much they really talk to other people, on the times that they really encounter folks every day, because they're absorbed in how much they can learn, right? From that bloody piece of electronics that we have in our hands.
But is it learning, or is it just being in somebody else's world and it's not a matter of learning, it's a matter of you're nosy.
Oh, nosy. or you want to be distracted from your own thing.
Yeah. And you know,
I mean,
and it brings drama. I mean, it seems like, the word you hear a lot nowadays is drama queen, but it's true. I mean, some people, it's everything is just so dramatic in their life, and it's like, really? I mean, it's like they are not comfortable in their own skins anymore. They are not comfortable with just sitting and silently contemplating even nothing. But when I taught, one of the first things I would address, especially my high school classes, was that I was there to teach, they were there to learn, and I wasn't Big Bird there to entertain them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's, one of the things that has happened in this society is that, it's kind of like in the arena in Rome when they were feeding the Christians to the lions. I mean, all of a sudden, everything in this world has to be entertaining us, and we just are not happy without this constant whirling about and the drama around us.
How do we turn liturgy from ritual back into some, I don't want to say meaningful liturgy, but some liturgy that's not ritual, that's like fresh.
Well, the whole, you don't have to see, most people have a ritual of eating 3 times a day. And I suppose you could reduce that to 1, or, but there's something about 3 times a day that seems to fit. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing to be ritualistic. Read The Little Prince.
I have read that.
Okay, and read the part where the prince meets the fox, and the fox says to him, ritual is really important. If I come here to see you every day at 3 o'clock, you will start rejoicing at 2 o'clock, maybe 1 o'clock, that you're going to see me, right? And see, but what happens, the part about ritual is that something has to happen when it happens. Something has to happen in you. This is not entertainment. This is not entertainment. This is something, ritual is something that we make together with an established pattern. But it has to be fresh. And look at homilies, for instance, okay? Look at Francis's homilies. And then look at some of the homilies that, you hear in churches. When the homily really engages you. But sometimes you go there and you're all distracted by what's going on in your life, and you really can't listen closely and stuff like that, and you get out there and say, God, that was a shitty homily, right? Well, you really didn't listen to it. But not to say that there aren't homilies that are abysmal, I preached some.
So pretty much you need to be conscious. You have to make a point of being conscious, because at least for me, it's very easy for me to be on automatic. You know, I can maneuver through my life and everything's fine, but if I take the time for prayer, maybe before I go into church to hear the message, then, you know, being more conscious will give me the opportunity to hear in a different way, I think.
Yeah.
I think today it's being referred to very frequently as mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
Mindfulness. You know, we don't just go on autopilot.
But there's a part to your question, I think, that makes us more aware of the fact that we can't do things the way we do them just because that's the way we've always done them. I mean, it's obvious that we are not speaking, that our liturgy is not playing as big a role as it could in evangelical discipleship as it could. And that's, there's a lot of reasons for that. But, you know, some people have said, you know, that what we really need to do is get back to the way we used to do things before. Well, that's a disastrous kind of way to think that you can, you know, make a car the way you made it 50 years ago, and that will be a better car. And in some ways they are. You know, they were made out of metal instead of plastic, and things lasted longer, and they were easier to fix, and all the rest of that kind of stuff. But the fact is that they just don't work in this kind of a society. But at the same time, we have to, you know, we've done a kind of, the tide came in and then the tide went out as far as liturgy is concerned and creativity in liturgy. After Vatican II, you know, there were a lot of people's rethinking liturgy and trying stuff, see, but gradually that became a mortal sin because you weren't supposed to make any mistakes, you know, which is a really inhuman way of looking at it. We want to know that we're doing it right without any experimentation whatsoever, which seems foolish. And so gradually, then the tide really goes out, and we get the new translation of the Roman Missal, which is wonderful for liturgists because they are so faithful to the text. I mean, they say what the text in Greek and Latin really means, but we don't understand it. And it creates distance between the worshiper and what's going on. And that's not a good thing to do. Although we can't blame it all on the missal, because we've got a lot to learn as a people, you know, as the people of God. We've got a lot to learn. And most people don't see learning as part of their life as Christians. Learning about who we are and what the gospel calls us to, and learning about what it means to say just the word church, you know. We're in the process of reformation, and we've got to be all the time. And there again, we're either addicted to change or addicted to keeping things the way they are, right? Any other questions? Yes.
I have one other comment, just to go a little further. When you wrote liturgy up there and you did ritual and rubrics and music, it seems like to me about a month ago, something Francis said in a small, because I'm looking at a whole lot of things and I can't remember exactly where it was, but he said to the people, my gosh, this is Jesus Christ substantially in your presence in the church. And ever since then, I look at that little part of the Mass, that happening, and the presence, just like, you're in that building, in the community, and substantially Jesus is right there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's right there, and it makes it really different. It's made it different for me.
Yeah.
In this last month, and I don't know exactly when he said it. It was something about Mass and going and the thing that he just zipped that in, and it struck me anyway.
Well, we see, we were brought up talking about the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, right? And so that was our only real knowledge of the fact that God is present to us in Jesus, in the Eucharist. It's like the world is this non-Jesus, and we go to church and this is Jesus. We didn't get any idea, in the decree on the liturgy, Sacrosanctum Concilium, it says that God is present in the Word, in sacrament, in the priest, and in the people. All four of those. Now, if you talk about real presence in that situation, then it's almost like in this binary kind of thinking that we just love, because it makes things black and white and easier for us to understand. Then if that's the real presence, then are those others not real? We don't know what that word real means. We think it means the same thing as it does, the same thing as between truth and falsehood. We need to get back to basics. That's all there is to it. We need to get back to basics. This is the kind of stuff. And how do you do that for liturgy? I mean, I think that resourcing is what it's all about. Getting back to finding out why those things arose in the first place. Or at least be creative enough to find to find a reason in your own head for why people might have done it. Certainly, there's the whole idea of, in fasting, give people who are wealthy and live. Listen to this. Think of the starving children in the refugee camps. Think only of this. This is the fruit of war. And if you like, think of the great sell of the parties that people who own weapons factories make. On the one hand, a sick child starving in a refugee camp, and on the other hand, the great parties, the sweet life of those who manufacture weapons.
That book, Francis said that?
Yeah. La dolce vita. Okay, it's 11 o'clock, and I think we're through. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father.